Welcome to this video. We start with a BR Class 31 heading a newspaper train back in the early 80s, as was common back then. It's a Sunday at 4:20 in the morning, in January, and the cold rain has not stopped all night. This all very much reminds me of happy times back in the early 80s, when my good friend Pete would stay over on a Saturday night, playing Ludo with my dad and I and discussing model trains. We would wake at 4 o'clock and head to the New Lane crossing at Havant, armed with tape recorders. The reason? Well, the late Bristol to Portsmouth on a Saturday was headed by two Class 31s in multiple, as the Bristol service was 10 coaches long. The locos were left coupled up and sent to Havant on Sunday morning for the paper trains. The main train would arrive from Waterloo headed by a Class 50. One Class 31 would go to Portsmouth and Southsea with some of the vans. The other would run to Barnham, then Bognor Regis with two vans. The Class 50 would head with its remaining vans to Fratton. Our Class 31 now pushes its vans to the waiting newsagents in their road vans. Post office trolleys and brutes await the bundles of papers. A 2EPB passes by with a staff train. Suddenly the Class 31's engine shuts down. The chilled air feels even colder and everything seems to be, well, strange. In the distance comes the sound of a steam engine. Closer, closer, then oh my! Clearly a very old locomotive and train passes by, but it's as if it's not there really, not there at all. Everyone is shocked and a little scared. The apparition passes by. With that, Class 31 springs back to life. Everyone gets on with the task at hand, not daring to mention what everyone just saw. Stan, the angry foreman's brother, offers an explanation from his Book of All Railways. The story of Old Shark. A member of the BT Falcon Class 240, number 86 Shark, was new in 1867, but rebuilt by Adams in 1892. Every Sunday early in the morning, Shark would set out with her crew on an early morning goods and passenger train, usually consisting of just one coach and up to 6 or 7 wagons. The story goes that one very wet Sunday morning in January 1896, her crew had prepared the locomotive and train ready for the usual trip. Oddly, no passengers were waiting for the little train, probably because it was so cold and wet. It seems the crew, driver, fireman and guard all retired to the shunter's cabin for a cup of warming tea. However, something went terribly wrong because Shark and her train rolled out of the siding and onto the main line, breaking the pointwork and terrifying the signalman. Despite his shock, the signalman immediately sent 4 bells, 5 bells and 5 more bells. an emergency code for a runaway train in section. The next signal box could hardly believe his ears as he confirmed the code. And threw his mainline points to the small station yard and sand drag. As the signalman looked into the blackness of the morning, the cold rain stinging his face, he could hear the rhythmic exhaust of a train approaching. And then she appeared, in full cry, smoke and steam billowing. The signalman later remarked how the locomotive seemed to be at full regulator, which didn't make any sense. The runaway train smashed into the pointwork at far too high a speed and proceeded to derail, partly demolishing the down platform of the station and coming to a stand inches from the station master's house, who was asleep in bed at the time. A quick-thinking shunter who was just going on duty jumped into the cab and pulled the regulator back to off and dropped the fire as fast as he could. It took a week for the wreckage to be removed and 6 weeks for the investigation to conclude that the men involved had not failed in their duties. The guard's handbrake was tightly wound on, but only 2 worn shoes were touching the wheel tread. Even Sharp's handbrake was almost fully on, and nobody could explain the reason the regulator was fully open. Mechanical failure, the cold, the wet, were all considered but rejected. It was said that on a cold, wet January Sunday morning, the ghost of the runaway would once again be seen by those who happened to be awake in the small hours, and that the sounds of the crash could be heard at the next station.